Let's paint a soft and mild sunset. Hello and welcome back to Run My Arts watercolor tutorial series. You can follow me by the same name on Facebook as well as Instagram. So previously I made a tutorial on how to paint a very vibrant and colorful looking seaside sunset. So if you'd like to check out that tutorial, I will leave the link in the description. And contrary to this tutorial, today I'll be showing you how to paint in a very minimalist style, where we are going to paint a very soft sunset. As you can see, some of these pictures were taken right in front of my home balcony. I'll be using the 100ml Britannia cold pressed watercolor paper, 300 grams per square meter. And to kickstart, this painting will be done on using the wet on wet technique. So as you can see here, I am pre-wetting the paper generously with some clean water. And the first color is going to be a very cool grey, whereby I have mixed indigo with a little hint of burnt sienna. I'm mixing these two and arriving at this cool grey shade. You can use Payne's grey if you have. Over here I'm just trying to show you the difference between this cool grey mix against the indigo. So if you want a hint of blue in the sky color, then you can right away use indigo, but I would like to prefer to the cool grey, since this is a very soft looking sunset, especially on a very cloudy day, and there is more greyish tone in the sky. So since we have pre-wet the watercolor paper, you don't need a very soaked wet brush to pick up your paint mixes. So use a very damp brush so that it concentrates more on the paint mix. And quickly I'm dropping in with some light brush strokes onto the pre-wet surface. As you can see here, it's quite mild. I'm not going to paint the entire white space, it's just here and there to create the impression of light cloudiness in the sky. You can tilt the paper slightly just to help the paint move or bleed further. And the second color is going to be a very light orangey hue. So I'm mixing some Indian yellow with a hint of bright red and arriving at this color. Once again, using a clean damp brush to pick up the paint, just dropping it here and there. Also not very dominant, just a little bit, especially focus on the middle part of the paper. And the third shade is going to be a pink shade, whereby I'm mixing magenta with a hint of permanent carmine or crimson. I arrive at this slightly bright pink and using my micro brush, because I want this shade to be very minimal in between these orange and grey clouds. So a smaller bristle brush would be much more helpful to achieve this fine staining. And please remember, these are all painted on a wet surface, so do ensure your paper surface is still wet. So the next step is to create some impression of simple landscape on the bottom part of the painting. So I've added a little bit more of the burnt sienna into the grey mix that I had earlier to paint the clouds, so that it has a little bit of brownish hint to the grey mix. And also, while the paper is still wet, I am quickly painting just loosely to create that impression of some trees and hills in the background. If you do not wish to paint this landscape impression using the wet on wet technique, it's okay, you can paint it as a wet on dry. But the sky, you will really have to maintain the wetness in order to achieve that soft sky look. And also remember to clean the borders to avoid further staining from paint residue on the masking tape. Alright, this is how the painting looks like once the first layer of painting has dried, and I'm quite happy with the minimalist look of it. Next step is to put in further details onto the landscape. So I'm just adding in a little bit of burnt umber or sapphire into the earlier pink shade mix that I had, and arriving at a burgundy shade. I'm going to use this paint to paint in impressions of roofs, home roofs or house roofs. Just a very simple looking roofs, nothing in detail. I am using the micro brush to paint in these tiny details. Done with the roof painting, next I am using the grey shade to paint in the building blocks. And I've also extended the same grey paint shade to paint in some impressions of trees and bushes. To add more depth to this landscape painting, I have decided to use Sepia shade to paint in other trees and bushes in distance. So this creates a perspective of various subject matters in the landscape instead of appearing very dull and flat. And as you move further, or things that are seen at a more distance, the shade shall get lighter. As you can see here, the lighter the shade, the further the subject matter is. So it's all a matter of color tones, and you don't have to worry too much about the details, because these details are not even seen with our naked eyes. So obviously the painting can be very casual. So a little bit of touch up onto some of these roofs, whereby I'm just repainting using the burgundy shade just to create some impressions of shadows underneath or on the roofs, similar to the details in the background, simply because this would create perspective that these houses are not linear on the ground. They are at various angles and a distance too. So alright, this is the first touch up that I'm doing onto the sky painting after its first layer of painting, and it's just white gouache where I'd like to create some popping highlights where the sun would be a bit brighter, especially in the middle, and a little bit of ray or like a silver lining in the cloud. So upon applying the white gouache paint using my micro brush, I'm just softening it with a clean damp brush. So moving on, I thought it will be fun to have an impression of a moon's reflection in a form of crescent during the sunset. We have all witnessed this phenomena. So using the same white gouache, I'm just lightly painting a crescent, a small crescent on the left hand corner, especially on the darker side of the grey cloud or grey sky. A little bit of final touches onto the housing, where I'm just using my script brush to lightly paint in some impression of doors and windows. You can use a dark grey shade or indigo. Last but not least, I thought of filling up the empty sky with some flock of birds flying during the sunset. It's a common sight. So using the same grey shade mix, I'm just lightly painting impression of those birds in distance, and I'm using a script brush. So you can paint it however you wish to, or you can even leave it empty. I just thought of filling in these empty spaces just to complete this entire painting. Just a reminder that this minimal sky was painted on just one layer. I did not repaint it. So it is achievable to paint a very simple looking sky on just one layer, as long as you choose the right color palette and keep your brush strokes minimal. So if you find this tutorial helpful and enjoyable, then do hit the like and share button. and subscribe to my channel if you haven't. Thank you for watching. See you in another tutorial. Bye.